Hey Indian Creek 8th grade students. We wanted to create this video for you to watch to help you understand exactly how to go through answering the take-home portion of the quest to make sure that you are meeting the standards, you're covering all of your information, and also to show how you can transition the information from the outline sheet to a short response that you can submit. So the first thing, we're looking at our outline sheet. We are looking at the topic about General McClellan and how his leadership affected the early battles of the Civil War, and if you think President Lincoln should have fired McClellan. So the first step that you can see right here, the first step to answering your topic is to create a claim about it. Now, claim might be a little misleading. What we want you to do essentially is make your claim your answer to the topic. So if someone were to ask you, how did General McClellan's leadership affect the early battles of the Civil War, and should Lincoln have fired McClellan, your answer to that question is your claim. So let's say you believe that McClellan's leadership was very poor. He continued to disobey orders, and he showed that he could not lead soldiers into battle effectively, and so therefore President Lincoln was absolutely right to fire McClellan. So you come down here to write your claim, and there we have it. So General McClellan's leadership was incredibly poor during the early battles of the Civil War, as he continually disobeyed orders from his commander-in-chief. We all know that he did that. He showed himself to be an inept leader of soldiers time and again, and President Lincoln was absolutely right to fire him. So in our claim, we have answered both of the questions in the topic. How did his leadership affect the early battles of the Civil War, and should Lincoln have fired McClellan? So the next step is to come down here, and you're needing to back up your claim with evidence. So the best place to get evidence, because we at this point in your careers as students are not experts on the Civil War. So making a claim about the Civil War is not enough to prove that your claim is correct. So you need evidence from somewhere else to show that what you are saying is true. So the best place to go for a lot of the evidence that you can find is in your textbooks. So we can actually go here to look at our textbook, and let's say we're looking down, and on page 470 we see, in talking about McClellan, that he hesitated to fight because of reports that overestimated the size of the rebel forces. So let's say that you want to use this as one of your pieces of evidence. So we copy that, we come right back in here, and there's our piece of evidence, that McClellan hesitated to fight because of reports that overestimated the size of the rebel forces. So the next step, now that you have your piece of evidence that backs up your claim, because remember, your claim is that McClellan was a poor leader, he couldn't be trusted with soldiers. So the next step in your support box is to connect your evidence back to your claim. So in looking at your piece of evidence, which says he hesitated to fight because of reports that overestimated the size of rebel forces, you might say that McClellan was proven to be a cowardly leader, unwilling to take his troops into battle. He also relied on inaccurate information to make his decisions about fighting rather than listening to his orders. So your support comes right out of the evidence that you have. When it says McClellan hesitated to fight, that proves right here that he was a cowardly leader, unwilling to take his troops into battle. And the reason that he hesitated to fight is because of reports that overestimated the size of rebel forces. So even the reports that he had weren't true, because they didn't give a good idea of how many rebels they were fighting. So that's where we get the fact that he relied on inaccurate information to make his decisions rather than listening to his orders. Both your piece of evidence and your support connect right back to your claim. So why don't we do one more example? So if we go back here to our textbook, and if we're looking over here to the Union defeat at Richmond, we see that instead of advancing directly overland, as Lincoln wished, McClellan moved his huge army by ship to a peninsula between the York and James rivers. So why don't we say that that'll be our second piece of information. We come back here, type it in. We'll space it up here so you can actually see it all. So instead of advancing directly overland, this is our second piece of evidence. We'll throw quotation marks around it to show that it's coming from the textbook. And now we want to give our support again. So another way to connect this piece of information to your claim would be to say that McClellan again disobeyed a direct order from President Lincoln and chose to take his own route onward in the fight against the rebels. This type of leadership caused a great disadvantage to the Union during this time. So again, your piece of support is talking about your evidence. It's born from your evidence, and it connects right back to your claim that Lincoln was right to fire McClellan because McClellan was not a good leader. So now, because we're not going to do the third piece of evidence in support, I don't want to give too much information away. But now, let's say you're looking to write a short response as your way of showing that you meet these standards. So if we zoom out here, we should actually be able to look at both of these sheets at the same time. Okay, so let's say now you're looking at your quest responses. So the best way to start your response would be to give your claim, to answer the question. So we can go over here. You've got your claim right here. We'll copy it and paste it. We can size it up a little bit so everyone can read it. And you can see that, okay, we've got our claim is starting our short response. So after you give your claim to start your response, which again, your claim is that his leadership was poor, he continually disobeyed orders and showed himself to be an inept leader. Now you want to bring in your evidence and support to back up your claim. So rather than simply just copying and pasting your evidence and your support, because that would make your writing very confusing for a reader, it wouldn't really flow well, what you want to do is add just a little brief statement to introduce your evidence. So you could say, for example, that one shortcoming McClellan had during this time was, so now you've introduced your evidence. You can come over here and copy that and add it right into your response, and we'll change this color back just to make sure everyone can remember that it's your evidence. And now, because your support already connects to your evidence and it already also connects to your claim, you don't need to add anything else at this point. You can just simply copy your support and you can paste that right in there as well. And again, we'll change the color so that everyone can remember that it's your support. So now you've given your first piece of evidence and support to back up your claim. Now if you want to bring in the second one, we can scroll down here a little bit just so everyone can see it. And our second piece of evidence says, instead of advancing directly overland, as Lincoln wished, McClellan moved his huge army by ship. No problem. Again, you need to give a little bit of information that will introduce your piece of evidence, because again, we want your writing to flow really well. So for example, we could say that at the beginning of the Union's attack on Richmond, and now you've introduced your piece of evidence, so you can come over here, copy it. I'm sure it's going to paste nice and ugly, because of course it will. So we will clean this up, and then we will change the font back to blue so everyone can remember that this is your second piece of evidence. Now again, because your support connects to your piece of evidence and also to your claim, you can just copy that and add it right in. And so again, we'll change this to green so everyone can remember that it's support. And now you have a pretty good start on your response. So what we can do is briefly just change everything over to black. We can read over what we have, and you can see that all of the information from your outline sheet really can just transition over really nicely into getting a good start on your response. So we have so far that McClellan's leadership was incredibly poor during the early battles of the Civil War. He continually disobeyed orders. He showed himself to be an inept leader, and President Lincoln was right to fire him. Then you say one shortcoming McClellan had during this time and give an example. You back that up with your support. Then you give another example of McClellan's shortcomings, and again down here back it up with your support. Now you would do the same thing with your third piece of evidence and support. Hopefully this would be something that talks more about Lincoln firing McClellan or giving another reason why Lincoln was right to fire McClellan. But you can see hopefully that all the information that you're doing over here on your outline sheet, your claim, your evidence, and your support transitions really easily into writing a short response. So you could also use this if you were planning on doing a video. This could provide the outline for what you were going to talk about, or if you were going to write a letter, again, this would be information to include in your letter. So outside of the few little things that you had to add just to make your writing flow nice and smoothly to introduce your evidence, almost all of the work that you've done for your response to the take-home portion of the quest is already done on your outline sheet, and then it's just you have to put it into paragraph or letter format. So hopefully this video was really helpful in explaining how to go about answering the questions for the take-home portion of the quest, and hopefully you will feel much more comfortable in submitting a really good solid assignment that meets the standards for the end of this chapter. So for now, this has been Professor Blazek. You have your projects, and I want to wish you all good luck.